at Shizuku's Reviews, bringing you a southern perspective on books, movies, music, and much, much more. Stick around for a while, you just might hear something wicked. Well, hello again, friends, and welcome to episode 16. This is a Makeup Monday read brought to you on Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. I just got done making up last Friday's read for episode 15, so you should be able to find that now on YouTube. And something that I had forgotten completely to include in my episodes is the like, subscribe, and share. Now, you can do that, but I don't really wish to make a habit of asking everyone to like, subscribe, and share. If you found me, it's because you want to be here. If you keep following me, it's because you enjoy what I'm doing. So that's the reason I haven't really been asking you to spread the word, so to say. But if you're smart, you might. So let's jump into our 1001 things that everyone should know about science. And we are continuing on in this episode with the enduring mystery. Fact 23. Where did the vertebrae come from? Tracing out the evolutionary steps that led to present-day vertebrae turns out to be rather difficult. One current theory about how animals acquired a backbone, based on the observation of living animals, is this. There are some animals whose larvae swim around and have something like a spinal cord. In this stage, they resemble primitive tadpoles. In adult life, however, they lose both the ability to move the spinal cord The theory: animals like these evolved to a stage where the adult phase was eliminated. In effect, they lived all their life as larvae. Once this step was taken, the bony protection for the now vulnerable spinal cord evolved, and vertebrae were off and running. 24. There are many orders of vertebrae. Vertebrae are the most familiar animals, of course, and there are many orders within the subphylum. The orders are fishes, 3 different kinds, amphibians, reptiles, aves, birds, mammals. 25. The shark has no bones. Its entire skeleton is made from cartilage, a fact that explains its flexibility when swimming. Sharks and lampreys are surviving representatives of the most primitive forms of fish as early as 400 million years ago. The oceans teemed with fish, which were the most advanced form of life at the time. Many of these early fish already had bony skeletons. Many were huge things with armored heads and bodies, and are now extinct. Such bony fish, which now include everything except sharks and lamprey, evolved in fresh water and only later moved to the ocean. 26. Some primitive fishes had lungs that breathed air. The first bony fishes had lungs, probably to help them get more oxygen In most fish, these lungs into swim bladders and are no longer used for respiration. It used to be thought that ocean-going lungfish had been extinct for over 70 million years, but in 1939, fishermen pulled a living specimen from the Indian Ocean. Since then, many more have been found, and there's no doubt that at least one fossil animal is still around today. Oddly enough, what nature couldn't do, human beings may accomplish. The living fossils of the Indian Ocean are so valuable as museum specimens that they may well be hunted into extinction by native fishermen. 27. Amphibians such as frogs and salamanders evolved from lungfish. They carry a reminder of their origin in the fact that they still spend part of their life cycle in water. The crucial step in the move to land was the evolution of fins into legs capable of moving the animals around in the new environment. 28. Reptiles were the first vertebrates completely adapted for life on land. They include turtles, snakes, lizards, and crocodiles. The features that distinguish them from amphibians are scales to control water loss, a tough egg with a lot of yolk to allow the young to grow before they emerge, a heart capable of moving oxygen around the body more efficiently, and a more complex brain. 29. Birds descended from reptiles. Birds are characterized by having feathers, which evolved from scales, a heart with a two-chambered ventricle, and a larger brain than reptiles. They also have large bone in the chest where the muscles used in flying, the white meat, is attached. All birds were originally equipped for flight, although some, such as the ostrich, have evolved away from that mode of life. 30. Birds are warm-blooded. Amphibians and reptiles are cold-blooded, that is. Their body temperature depends on the temperature of the surrounding air. This is why snakes and frogs are so sluggish in the morning and why they spend so much time sunning themselves. Birds, on the other hand, have a metabolism that maintains a constant body temperature. They are the lowest form of life for which this is clearly true, although there is debate over whether some dinosaurs were also warm-blooded. 31. Mammals are animals that have hair, large brains, and suckle their young. They are also warm-blooded. Human beings belong to the class of mammals, as do most familiar large animals. Warm-bloodedness allows mammals to function in cold climates, where cold-blooded animals cannot survive. While the large brain allows them to adopt various social strategies not available to other life forms, mammals were around throughout the age of reptiles. They did not appear suddenly when the dinosaurs were wiped out. They played a minor role in ecosystems throughout the Mesozoic era, in the form of a mouse-like creature eking out an existence in a world populated by giant reptiles. They blossomed only after their competition was removed. And we shall continue with this particular read the next time we have Monday reads, and the section we will continue with is how animals are put together. So look forward to that. But I shall take a break and I will be right back. See you on the other side. Welcome back again. Thank you for joining me. So, we will be continuing on in this episode with Thomas Jefferson's second inaugural address. March 4th, 1805. Proceeding, fellow citizens, to that qualification which the Constitution requires before my entrance on the charge again conferred on me. It is my duty to express the deep sense I entertain of this new proof of confidence from my fellow citizens at large, and the zeal which with which it inspires me to conduct myself as may best satisfy their just expressions. On taking this station on a former occasion, I declared the principles on which I believed it my duty to administer the affairs of our commonwealth. My conscience tells me I have on every occasion acted up to that declaration according to its obvious import and to the understanding of every candid mind. In the transaction of your foreign affairs, we have endeavored to cultivate the friendship of all nations, and especially of those with which we have the most important relations. We have done them justice on all occasions, favored where favor was lawful, and cherished mutual interest and intercourse on fair and equal terms. We are firmly convinced, and we act on that conviction, that with nations as with individuals of our interests soundly calculated, will ever be found inseparable from our moral duties, and history bears witness to the fact that a just nation is trusted on its word when recourse is had to armaments and wars to bridle others. At home, fellow citizens, you best know whether we have done well or ill. The suppression of unnecessary offices, of useless establishments and expenses enabled us to discontinue our internal taxes. These covering our land with officers and opening our doors to their intrusions had already begun that process of domiciliary vexation which once entered is scarcely to be restrained from reaching successively every article of property and produce. If among these taxes some minor ones fell, which had not been inconvenient, it was because their amount would not have paid the officers who collected them, and because, if they had any merit, the state authorities might adopt them instead of other less approved. The remaining revenue on the consumption of foreign articles is paid chiefly by those who can afford to add foreign luxuries to domestic comforts, being collected on our seaboard and frontiers only, and incorporated with the transactions of our mercantile citizens. It may be the pleasure and the pride of an American to ask what farmer, what mechanic, what laborer ever sees a tax gatherer of the United States. These contributions enable us to support the current expenses of the government, to fulfill contracts with foreign nations, to extinguish the native right of soil within our limits, to extend those limits, and to apply such a surplus to our public debts as places at a short day their final redemption, and that redemption, once effected, the revenue thereby liberated may, by a just repartition of it among the states, and a corresponding amendment of the Constitution, be applied in time of peace to rivers, canals, roads, arts, manufacturers, education, and other great objects within each state. In time of war, if injustice by ourselves or others must sometimes produce war, increased as the same revenue will be by increased population and consumption, and aided by other resources reserved for that crisis. It may meet within the year all the expenses of the year without encroaching on the rights of future generations by burdening them with the debts of the past. War will then be but a suspension of useful works, and a return to a state of peace, a return to the progress of improvement. I have said, fellow citizens, that the income reserved had enabled us to extend our limits, but that extension may possibly pay for itself before we are called on, and in the meantime may keep down the accruing interest. In all events, it will replace the advances we shall have made. I know that the acquisition of Louisiana has been disapproved by some from a candid apprehension that the enlargement of our territory would endanger its union. But who can limit the extent to which the federative principle may operate effectively? The larger our association, the less it will be shaken by local passions. In any view, it is not better that the opposite bank of the Mississippi should be settled by our own brethren and children than by strangers of another family. With which should we be most likely to live in harmony and friendly intercourse. In matters of religion, I have considered that its free exercise is placed by the Constitution, independent of the powers of the general government. I have therefore undertaken on no occasion to prescribe the religious exercise suited to it, but have left them, as the Constitution found them, under the direction and discipline of the church or state authorities, acknowledged by the several religious societies. The aboriginal inhabitants of these countries I have regarded with some commiseration. Their history inspires, endowed with the facilities and the rights of men, breathing an ardent love of liberty and independence, and occupying a country which left them no desire but to be undisturbed. The stream of overflowing population from other regions directed itself on these shores, without power to divert or habits to contend against. They have been overwhelmed by the current or driven before it, now reduced within limits too narrow for the hunter's state. Humanity enjoins us to teach them agriculture and the domestic arts, to encourage them to that industry which alone can enable them to maintain their place in existence, and to prepare them in time for that state of society which to bodily comforts adds the improvement of mind and morals. We have therefore liberally furnished them with the implements of husbandry and household use. We have placed among them instructors in the arts of first necessity, and they are covered with the aegis of the law against aggressors from among ourselves. But the endeavors to enlighten them on the fate which awaits their present course of life, to induce them to exercise their reason, follows its dictates, and change their pursuits, with which the change of circumstances have powerful obstacles to encounter. They are combated by the habits of their bodies, prejudices of their minds, ignorance, pride, and influence of the interested and crafty individuals among them who feel themselves something in the present order of things and fear to become nothing in any other. These persons inculcate a sanctimonious reverence for the customs of their ancestors, that whatsoever they did must be done through all time. That reason is a false guide, and to advance under its counsel in their physical, moral, or political condition is a perilous innovation, that their duty is to remain as their Creator made them, ignorance being safety and knowledge full of danger. In short, my friends, among them also is seen the action and counteraction of good sense and of bigotry. They too have their anti-philosophites, who find an interest in keeping things in their present state, who dread reformation, and exert all their faculties to maintain the ascendancy of habit over the duty of improving our reason and obeying its mandates. In giving these outlines, I do not mean, fellow citizens, to arrogate to myself the merit of the measures that is due, in the first place, to the reflecting character of our citizens at large, who, by the weight of public opinion, influence and strengthen the public measures. It is due to the sound discretion with which they select from among themselves those to whom they confide the legislative duties. It is due to the zeal and wisdom of the characters thus selected, who lay the foundations of public happiness and wholesome laws, the execution of which alone remains for others. And it is due to the able and faithful auxiliaries whose patriotism has associated them with me in the executive functions. During this course of administration, and in order to disturb it, the artillery of the press has been leveled against us, charged with whatsoever its licentiousness could devise or dare. These abuses of an institution so important to freedom and science are deeply to be regretted, inasmuch as they tend to lessen its usefulness and to sap its safety. They might, indeed, have been corrected by the wholesome punishments reserved to and provided by the laws of the several states against falsehood and defamation, but public duties more urgent press on the time of public servants, and the offenders have therefore been left to find their punishment in the public indignation. Nor was it uninteresting to the world that an experiment should be fairly and fully made, whether freedom of discussion, unaided by power, is not sufficient for the propagation and protection of truth, whether a government conducting itself in the true spirit of its constitution, with zeal and purity, and doing no act which it would be unwilling the whole world should witness, can be written down by falsehood and defamation. The experiment has been tried. You have witnessed the scene. Our fellow citizens looked on, cool and collected. They saw a latent source from which these outrages proceeded. They gathered around their public functionaries, and when the Constitution called them to the decision by suffrage, they pronounced their verdict, honorable to those who had served them, and consolatory to the friend of man who believes that he may be trusted with the control of his own affairs. No inference is here intended that the laws provided by the states against false and defamatory publications should not be enforced. He who has time renders a service to public morals and public tranquility in reforming these abuses by the salutary coercions of the law. But the experiment is noted to prove that, since truth and reason have maintained their ground against false opinions in league with false facts, the press, confined to truth, needs no other legal restraint. The public judgment will correct false reasonings and opinions on a full hearing of all parties, and no other definite line can be drawn between the inestimable liberty of the press and its demoralizing licentiousness. If there be still improprieties which this rule would not restrain, its supplement must be sought in the censorship of public opinion. Contemplating the union of sentiment now manifested so generally as auguring harmony and happiness to our future course, I offer our country sincere congratulations. With those too not yet rallied to the same point, the disposition to do so is gaining strength. Facts are piercing through the veil drawn over them, and our doubting brethren will at length see that the mass of their fellow citizens with whom they cannot yet resolve to act as to principles and measures, think as they think, and desire what they desire, that our wish, as well as theirs, is that the public efforts may be directed honestly to the public good, that peace be cultivated, civil and religious liberty unassailed, law and order preserved, equality of rights maintained, and that state of property, equal or unequal, which results to every man from his own industry or that of his fathers. When satisfied with these views, it is not in human nature that they should not approve and support them. In the meantime, let us cherish them with patient affection. Let us do them justice, and more than justice, in all competitions of interest. We need not doubt that truth, reason, and their own interests will at length prevail, will gather them into the fold of their country, and will complete that entire union of opinion, which gives to a nation the blessing of harmony and the benefit of all its strength. I shall now enter on the duties to which my fellow citizens have again called me, and shall proceed in the spirit of those principles which they have approved. I fear not that any motives of interest may lead me astray. I am sensible of no passion which could seduce me knowingly from the path of justice, but the weakness of human nature and the limits of my own understanding will produce errors of judgment sometimes injurious to your interests. I shall need, therefore, all the indulgence which I have heretofore experienced from my constituents. The want of it will certainly not lessen with increasing years. I shall need, too, the favor of that being in whose hands we are, who led our fathers as Israel of old from their native land and planted them in a country flowing with all the necessaries and comforts of life, who has covered our infancy with his providence and our riper years with his wisdom and power, and to whose goodness I ask you to join in supplications with me, that he will so enlighten the minds of your servants, guide their counsels, and prosper their measures, that whatsoever they do shall result in your good, and shall secure to you the peace, friendship, and approbation of all nations. That gave me chill bumps. Did it give you chill bumps? So, next Monday read, we shall continue with James Madison, who happens to be one of my favorite presidents. He has a very interesting set of notes about within the Constitutional Convention. You might want to check those out. They're very, very interesting. But James Madison, out of the founding framers, he's one of my favorites. Okay, so we will continue quickly with The Art of Love and Other Love Books of Ovid. Elegy 6. He conjures the porter to open the door of his mistress's house. Hapless porter, laden with unmerited fetters, push me back, this cruel door upon its hinges. 'Tis little enough I ask of thee. No, do but open it a little, just enough for me to pass in sideways. I have long been a lover, and it has so reduced my body and my limbs that such a thing were easy. 'Tis love that tells me how to creep in softly in the midst of the guards. 'Tis he that guides me and safeguards my steps. Time was when I dreaded the night and its empty shadows. I marveled how anyone could fare forth in the darkness, but Cupid laughed in my face with his gentle mother, and whispered in my ear, thou too shalt grow a meddlesome fellow. Love's hour has come. I fear not the mazy shadows of the night, nor weapons uplifted against me. I only fear the slowness of thy movements. Thee alone I do cajole. In thy hands thou holdest the weapon that can undo me. See, and that thou may be more surely convinced. Take down a while these cruel bars. See how this door is moistened with my tears. This is I, thou knowest it well enough, who, seeing that thwacking were about to rain down on thy naked shoulders, interceded for thee with thy mistress. How now? Shall my supplications, which erstwhile proved so powerful in thy behalf, today, O shame, prove powerless in my own? Come, pay back what thou owest. Now mayest thou show thy gratitude to the top of thy bent. The night is passing. Slide back the bolts, open the door, and so may thou be freed forever from thy long chain and from thy water-drinking serfdom. Vain are my prayers, O man implacable. Harder than iron is my heart. Thou hearest me, and yet thy door of oak is barred against me. That a beleaguered town should need unyielding gates, 'tis well. But in the heyday of peace, what fear hast thou of arms? How wouldst thou treat a foe if thou repelled a lover thus? The night speeds on, slide back the bolts. I come not as a warrior attended by henchmen. I should be alone. Were not cruel love beside me, him, even if I desired it, I could not send it away. 'Twere easier to sunder my soul from my body. Love a little wine in my head, a chaplet slipping from my perfumed hair. These are the things I bring. Who could be scared at them? Who would be daunted by such foes? The night speeds on. Slide back the bolts. It is thy slowness. Is it sleep that is no friend to love, that makes thee heedless of my prayers and flings them to the winds? Yet, if my memory deceive me not, when, once on a time, I sought to evade thee, I found thee astir in the middle of the night. Peradventure, at this moment, thine own beloved is reposing at thy side. If this be so, how preferable is thy lot to mine! If it be so, pass on to me, ye cruel chains. The night speeds on. Slide back the bolts. Do I dream? Did not the door swing upon its hinges? Did it not grunt its signal for me to enter? Alas, I was deceived. 'Twas but an unruly gust of wind that made it creak. Ah, hapless me! How far away that gust doth bear my hopes! If, O Boreas, thou dost bethink thee of the ravished Orythia, come swiftly hither and, with thy blast, beat down this heedless door. All is quiet in the city, moist with diamond dew. The night speeds on. Slide back the bolts. Open, I say, open, or I, better prepared than thou, with my sword and with the fire I bear within my torch, will break into this disdainful house. Night, love, and wine counsel no half-hearted measures. Night knoweth not shame. Love and wine know not fear. Everything, prayers, threats, have I essayed, but all in vain. Naught could avail to move thee, O man more deaf than the door thou guardest. Thou wast not made to guard a lovely woman's door. Thy office should be to keep the key of a loathsome dungeon. But see, the morning star is risen, and the cock's shrill trumpet calls the laborer to his task, and flowery wreath, which from my brows sadly I disengage, lie there upon this heartless threshold through the night, when on the morrow my mistress shall descry thee trailing there. Tell her the hours that, sick at heart, I wasted at her door. Farewell, porter, in spite of all. I say to thee, farewell. Mayest thou myself suffer the agony of unrequited love. Muddy, meddled villain, who wouldst not give admittance to a lover. Fare thee well, and ye too, ye cruel doors with your pitiless hinges, and the threshold more slavish than the churl that guards thee. To all I say farewell. So obviously that didn't go according to plan. Now did it? So that's something to chew on for now and think about. So I shall be right back after a short break, and I will see you on the next side. Catch you then. Welcome back. And carrying on with our final segment, we shall have the Scottish fairy tale titled The Red-Etin. There were once two widows who lived in two cottages, which stood not very far from one another. And each of those widows possessed a piece of land on which she grazed a cow and a few sheep, and in this way she made her living. One of these poor widows had two sons, and the other had one. And as these three boys were always together, it was natural that they should become great friends. At last the time arrived when the eldest son of the widow, who had two sons, must leave home and go out into the world and seek his fortune. And the night before he went away, his mother told him to take a can and go to the well and bring back some water. And she would bake a cake for him to carry with him. But remember, she added, the size of the cake will depend on the quantity of water that thou bringest back. If thou bringest much, then will it be large. And if thou bringest little, then will it be small. But big or little, it is all that I have to give thee. The lad took the can and went off to the well and filled it with water and came home again, but he never noticed that the can had a hole in it. and was running out, so that by the time he arrived at home there was very little water left, so his mother could only bake him a very little cake. But small as it was, she asked him, as she gave it to him, to choose one of two things, either to take half of it with her blessing, or the whole of it with her malison. For, said she, thou canst not have both the whole cake and a blessing along with it. The lad looked at the cake and hesitated. It would have been pleasant to have left home with his mother's blessing upon him, but he had far to go, and the cake was little. The half of it would be a mere mouthful. He did not know when he would get any more food. So, at last he made up his mind to take the whole of it, even if he had to bear his mother's malison. Then he took his younger brother aside and gave him his hunting knife, saying, Keep this by thee, and look at it every morning, for as long as the blade remains clear and bright, thou wilt know that it is well with me. But should it grow dim and rusty, then thou know that some evil hath befallen me. After this he embraced them both and set out on his travels. He journeyed all that day and all the next, and on the afternoon of the third day he came to where an old shepherd was sitting beside a flock of sheep. I will ask the old man whose sheep they are, he said to himself, for mayhap his master might engage me also as a shepherd. So he went up to the old man and asked to whom the sheep belonged, and this was the answer he got. The Red-Etin of Ireland. Ants lived in Ballygan, and stole King Malcolm's daughter, the king of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand, like Julian the Roman. He's one that fears no man. It's said there's an predestinate to be his mortal foe, but that man is yet unborn, and lang may it be so. That does not tell me much, but somehow I do not fancy this Red-Etin for a master, thought the youth, and he went on his way. He had not gone very far, however, when he saw another old man with snow-white hair herding a flock of swine. And as he wondered to whom the swine belonged, and if there was any chance of him getting a situation as a swineherd, he went up to the countryman and asked who was the owner of the animals. He got the same answer from the swineherd that he had gotten from the shepherd. The Red-Etin of Ireland. Ants lived in Ballygan, and stole the King Malcolm's daughter, the king of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand, like Julian the Roman. He's the one who fears no man. It's said there's an predestinate to be his mortal foe, but that man is yet unborn, and lang may it be so. Plague on this old Red-Etin. I wonder when I will get out of his domains, he muttered to himself, and he journeyed still further. Presently he came to the very, very old man, so old indeed that he was quite bent with age, and he was herding flocks of goats. Once more the traveler asked to whom the animals belonged, and once more he got the same answer. The Red-Etin of Ireland. Ants lived in Ballygan, and stole King Malcolm's daughter, the king of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand, like Julian the Roman. He's one that fears no man. It's said there's a predestinate to be his mortal foe, but that man is yet unborn, and lang may it be so. But this ancient goat herd added a piece of advice at the end of his rhyme. "Beware, stranger," he said, "of the next herd of beasts that ye shall meet. Sheep, swine, and goats will harm nobody, but the creatures ye shall now encounter are of a sort that ye have never met before, and they are not harmless." The young man thanked him for his counsel, and went on his way. He had not gone very far before he met a herd of very dreadful creatures, unlike anything he had ever dreamed of in all of his life, for each of them had 3 heads, and on each of its 3 heads it had 4 horns, and when he saw them, he was so frightened that he turned and ran away from them as fast as he could. Up hill and down dale he ran, until he was well nigh exhausted. And just when he was beginning to feel that his legs could not carry him any further, he saw a great castle in front of him, the door of which was standing wide open. He was so tired that he went straight in, after wandering through some magnificent halls, which appeared to be quite deserted. He reached the kitchen, where an old woman was sitting by the fire. He asked her if he might have a night's lodging, as he had come a long and weary journey, and would be glad of somewhere to rest. "You can rest here, and welcome from me," said the old dame. "But for your own sake I warn you that this is an ill house to bide in, for it is the castle of the Red-Etin, who is a fierce and terrible monster with 3 heads, and he spareth neither man nor woman, if he can get a hold of them." Tired as he was, the young man would have made an effort to escape from such a dangerous abode, had he not remembered the strange and awful beasts from which he had just been fleeing. He was afraid that, as it was growing dark, if he set out again, he might chance to walk right into their midst. So he begged the old woman to hide him in some dark corner, and not let the Red-Etin, and not to tell the Red-Etin that he was in the castle. "For," thought he, "if I can only get shelter until the morning, I will be able to avoid these terrible creatures and go on my way in peace." So the old dame hid him in a press under the back stairs. And as there was plenty of room in it, he settled down quite comfortably for the night. But just as he was going off to sleep, he heard an awful roaring and tramping overhead. The Red-Etin had come home, and it was plain that he was searching for something, and the terrified youth soon found out what the something was. For very soon the horrible monster came into the kitchen, crying out in a voice like thunder, "Seek, but seek, Ben. I smell the smell of an earthly man. Be he living, or be he dead. His heart this night I shall eat with my bread." And it was not very long before he discovered the poor young man's hiding place and pulled him roughly out of it. Of course, the lad begged that his life might be spared, but the monster only laughed at him. "It will be spared if thou canst answer 3 questions," he said. "If not, it is forfeited." The first of these 3 questions was whether Ireland or Scotland was first inhabited. The second, how old was the world when Adam was made? And the third, whether men or beasts were created first. The lad was not skilled in such matters, having had but little book learning, and he could not answer the questions, so the monster struck him on the head with a queer little hammer which he carried, and turned him into a piece of stone. Now, every morning since he had left home, his younger brother had done as he had promised, and carefully examined his hunting knife. On the first 2 mornings it was bright and clear, but on the 3rd morning he was very much distressed to find that it was dull and rusty. He looked at it for a few moments in great dismay. Then he ran straight to his mother and held it out to her. "By this token I know that some mischief hath befallen my brother," he said. "So I must set out at once to see what evil hath come upon him." "First must thou go to the well and fetch me some water," said his mother. that I may bake thee a cake to carry with thee, as I baked a cake for him who is gone. And I will say to thee what I said to him, that the cake will be large or small, according as thou bringest much or little water back with thee. So the lad took the can, as his brother had done, and went off to the well. And it seemed as if some evil spirit directed him to follow his example in all things, for he brought home little water, and he chose the whole cake and his mother's malison, instead of the half and her blessing. And he set out and met the shepherd and the swineherd and the goatherd, and they all gave the same answers to him which they had given to his brother. And he also encountered the same fierce beasts, and ran from them in terror, and took shelter from them in the castle. And the old woman hid him, and the Red-Etin found him. And because he could not answer the 3 questions, he too was turned into a pillar of stone. And no more would ever have been heard of these 2 youths, had not a kind fairy, who had seen them all that had happened, appeared to the other widow and her son as they were sitting at supper one night in the gloaming, and told them the whole story, and how their 2 poor young neighbors had been turned into pillars of stone by a cruel enchanter called the Red-Etin. Now the 3rd young man was both brave and strong, and he determined to set out to see if he could in any wise help his 2 friends. And from the very first moment that he had made up his mind in doing so, things went differently with him than they had with them. I think perhaps that this was because he was much more loving and thoughtful than they were. For when his mother sent him to fetch water from the well, so that she might bake a cake for him, just as the other mother had done for her sons, a raven, flying above his head, croaked out that his can was leaking, and he, wishing to please his mother by bringing her a good supply of water, patched up the hole with clay, and so came home with the can quite full. Then, when his mother had baked a big bannock for him, and giving him his choice between the whole cake and her malison, or half of it and her blessing, he chose the latter. For, said he, throwing his arms round her neck, I may light on other cakes to eat, but I will never light on another blessing such as thine. And the curious thing was, that after he had said this, the half cake which he had chosen seemed to spread itself out and widen and broaden till it was bigger by far than it had been at first. Then he started on his journey, and after he had gone a good way, he began to feel hungry. So he pulled it out of his pocket and began to eat it. Just then he met an old woman who seemed to be very poor, for her clothing was thin and worn and old, and she stopped and spoke to him. Of thy charity, kind master, she said, stretching out one of her withered hands, spare me a bit of cake that thou art eating. Now the youth was very hungry, and he could have eaten it all himself, but his kind heart was touched by the woman's pinched face, so he broke it in 2 and gave her half of it. Instantly she was changed into the fairy who had appeared to his mother and himself as they had sat at supper the night before, and she smiled graciously at the generous lad, and held out a little wand to him. Thou knowest it not, thy mother's blessing and thy kindness to an old and poor woman hath gained thee many blessings, brave boy, she said. Keep that as thy reward. Thou wilt need it ere thy errand be done. Then, bidding him to sit down on the grass beside her, she told him of all the dangers he would meet on his travels, and the way in which he could overcome them. And then, in a moment, before he could thank her, she vanished out of his sight. But with the little wand and all the instructions that she had given him, he felt that he could face fearlessly any danger that he might be called on to meet. So he rose from the grass and went his way, full of the cheerful courage. After he had walked for many miles further, he came, as each of his friends had done, to the old shepherd herding his sheep. and like them, he asked to whom the sheep belonged. And this time the old man answered, "The Red-Etin of Ireland, and lived in Ballygan, and stole the King Malcolm's daughter, the King of fair Scotland. He beats her, he binds her, he lays her on a band, and every day he dings her with a bright silver wand. Like Julian the Roman, he's one that fears no man, but now I fear his end is near, and destiny is at hand, and you're to be, I plainly see, the heir of all his land." Then the young man went on, and he came to the swineherd, to the goatherd, and each of them in turn repeated the same words to him. And when he came to where the droves of monstrous beasts were, he was not afraid of them. And when he came running up to him, and when one came running up to him, its mouth wide open to devour him, he just struck it with his wand, and it dropped down dead at his feet. At last he arrived at the Red-Etin's castle, and he knocked boldly at the door. The woman answered his knock, and when he had told her his errand, warned him gravely not to enter. "Thy 2 friends came here before thee," she said, "and they are now turned into 2 pillars of stone. What advantage is it to thee to lose thy life also?" But the young man only laughed. "I have knowledge of an art of which they knew nothing," he said, "and methinks I can fight the Red-Etin with his own weapons." So, much against her will, the old woman let him in, and hid him where she had hid his friends. It was not long before the monster arrived, and as on former occasions, he came to the kitchen in a furious rage, crying, "Seek but, and seek then. I smell the smell of an earthly man. Be he living, or be he dead, his heart this night I shall eat with my bread." Then he peered into the young man's hiding place and called him to come out. And after he had come out, he put to him the 3 questions, never dreaming that he could answer them. But the fairy had told the youth what to say, and he gave the answers as pat as any book. Then the Red-Etin's heart sank within him for fear, for he knew that someone had betrayed him, and that his power was gone. And gone in every truth it was, for when the youth took an axe and began to fight with him, he had no strength to resist, and before he knew where he was, his heads were cut off, and that was the end of the Red-Etin. As soon as he saw that his enemy was really dead, the young man asked the old woman if what the shepherd and the swineherd and the goatherd had told him were true, and if King Malcolm's daughter were really a prisoner in the castle. The old woman nodded. "Even with the monster lying dead at my feet, I am almost afraid to speak of it," she said. "But come with me, my gallant gentleman, and thou wilt see what dole and misery the Red-Etin has caused to many a home." She took a bunch of keys and led him up a long flight of stairs, which ended in a passage with a great many doors on each side of it. She unlocked these doors with her keys, and as she opened them, she put her head into every room and said, "Ye have naught to fear now, madam. The predestinated deliverer hath come, and the Red-Etin is dead." And behold, with a cry of joy, out of every room came a beautiful lady who had been stolen from her home and shut up there by the Red-Etin. Among them was one who was more beautiful and stately than the rest, and all the others bowed down to her and treated her with such great reverence that it was clear to see that she was the royal princess, King Malcolm's daughter. When the youth stepped forward and did reverence to her also, she spoke so sweetly to him and greeted him so gladly, and called him her deliverer in such a low, clear voice that his heart was taken captive at once. But for all of that, he did not forget his friends. He asked the old woman where they were, and she took him into a room at the end of the passage, which was so dark that one could scarcely see in it, and so low that one could scarcely stand upright. In this dismal chamber, stood 2 blocks of stone. One can unlock doors, young master, said the old woman, shaking her head forebodingly, but 'tis hard work to try to turn cold stone back to flesh and blood. Nevertheless, I will do it, said the youth, and lifting his little wand, he touched each of the stone pillars lightly on the top. Instantly, the hard stone seemed to soften and melt away, and the 2 brothers started into life and form again. Their gratitude to their friend, who had risked so much to save them, knew no bounds, while he, on his part, was delighted to think that his efforts had been successful. The next thing to do was to convey the princess and the other ladies, who were all noblemen's daughters, back to the king's court, and this they did the next day. King Malcolm was so overjoyed to see his dearly loved daughter, whom he had given up for dead, safe and sound, and so grateful to her deliverer that he said that he should become his son-in-law and marry the princess and come and live with them at court. Which all came to pass in due time. While as for the 2 other young men, they married noblemen's daughter, and the old mothers came to live near their sons, and everyone was happy as they could possibly be. So, the moral of the story there, I suppose, should be that you should be thoughtful and kind to others. And put yourself behind them in order to be able to advance to a better place. So, I really hope you enjoyed this episode 16 of Wicked Shizuku's Reviews. You will be able to find episode 17 right away, as I will be uploading it to YouTube. Twitch has been giving me quite a bit of trouble lately. It will not, the stream will not, it won't be just one episode. Lately, what it has been doing for, what it did with episode 17 is that it completely broke all of the, it broke the video up into 35 segments. So I know that you don't want to sit there and watch little 30-minute segments and broken reading. So once I figure out what's going on with Twitch, I shall start uploading again, or start live streaming again on Twitch. And I really hope that you have a good evening, and all of you sleep well, and that you enjoyed this episode, and that you join us again for Wicked Shizuku's Reviews. If you have any questions, please reach me at wickedshizuku@gmail.com. Announcements are given on a daily on t.me/Wicked Shizuku's Reviews on Telegram. And you can find short poetry over at Sam Lynn Toll on Twitter. And also, my articles and archived reviews are on Substack under Wicked Shizuku's Reviews. And you can find past reads that I have done on YouTube channel Wicked Shizuku 27 channel. Have a good evening, and thanks for listening.